you very much for holding on to the end and not melting.
Welcome to the post-graveyard shift.
The headline act, I like to think
Exactly.
of it as. Thank you for joining me on stage, Shelley.
Thanks for having me.
We have this Creativity Squared as a sort of series that we have on LBB. So usually it exists in a sort of written format after having a conversation like this. So you get to see a bit of a kind of behind the scenes of the very sloppy chats that I have with creative people before it gets written up nice and neatly on LBB. But Creativity Squared came from...
I won't be able to edit any of this out?
We can talk about that. Just keep saying that's off the record.
Great.
I'm not sure if that works in this format. But we found some research. There are thousands of frameworks for creativity out there. But we found some research that was quite nice, which was to do with sort of 4 broad categories that influence any single person's creativity. And as was just mentioned there, it was person, product, process, and press. Press is a weird one. Yes. It doesn't mean like journalism. It means the sort of external forces.
Because I'm not very qualified to answer that one. If it
No. It's the external forces that are sort of acting on you, which... and we just thought that was a nice way to sort of construct profiles on people's creativity and trying to sort of get a shape of how a person's creative process works. So you've never done one of the Creativity Squared pieces.
I haven't.
So we're doing it in this format. It's just a chance for everyone here to get an idea of you personally as a creative and a creative leader and how you work, essentially. So
great.
Pretty straightforward. The first one is person, though, so we're starting personal.
Uh-oh. Wow, okay.
It's a really awkward one. It's always the kind of like, how would your friends describe you sort of thing. But is there anything about your personality that you think impacts the way that you create?
Yes. Wow, that was very loud, yes. I think I can be summed up in a word. If there was a word, it would be contradictions. Because, as much as I love my job, I'm actually best at it when I'm not doing it, when I'm going out and absorbing other stuff in the world. And I think, as much as I love ads themselves, I hate using ads as references because, that just means I'll keep doing more of the same. What else? I follow my gut and my intuition, but I interrogate it to death. I hate constraints, but I actually think it forces you to be even more creative. And I think I love weird, surprising ideas that just come out of nowhere, but I do think they need to be grounded in logic, and a very clear strategy. So I think contradictions is such an important part of my personality, but also the job. Like, I love that I'm an expert on beer one day and then banking the next day, and those are complete contradictions to each other. So, and also when you don't hold too tightly onto an idea or onto a view, then you're open to seeing fresh things around you. So I would say contradictions is probably the way I'd sum me up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way to go about things because the world is a pretty contradictory place, right?
Very
I was going to say,
so.
Are there any sort of ways that you see the world or sort of frameworks through which you like to...
Sideways. I see the world sideways. I think what I love doing and the work that I'm most attracted to is stuff that reframes things. So I guess I do that with the world. I look at the world and I try and look at it sideways and see it from a perspective as if I was seeing it for the first time. Like, and what would I think if I was seeing this thing for the first time ever? How would I feel about that? And I try and reframe the way others see it through that logic.
That makes a lot of sense. We're all sort of innately creative, of course. We've been hearing a lot about that on stage, and we always do at these kinds of conferences, of course. Do you think there's ways of learning creativity, though?
Absolutely. I think that is also a contradiction, because I think some creativity is innate and some is learned. Like, I don't think you can teach someone how to see the world sideways or how to have great taste. I think that's innate. But I think everything else can be learned. How to write scripts can be learned. How to design things can be learned. All of that stuff comes with experience and knowledge. So it's a mixture of the two, I would say.
I'd love to pick up on taste because it's one of my favorite things to sort of
Oh,
discuss with
such a broad
advertising
topic.
advertising people, because
Yeah.
it's, you know, I think in this industry people like to think they're all very cool and have excellent taste.
But taste is subjective.
Taste is subjective, and we don't want to be making advertising for just the people that have the same taste as you who work in the ad
Absolutely.
industry. And you look at sort of Lucky General's clients, for example, they're real kind of fabric of the nation, a lot of them. Look at
Yeah.
like Yorkshire tea, like the breadth of people
Of
that
course.
drink Yorkshire tea, you know.
But taste doesn't lend itself to one thing. I think you have to be able to adapt your taste. I think it's just a sense of, it's a sensibility as to what you think will be right for that brand. I think that's how I would describe taste. It's like your gut and your kind of initiative to think that that is the right decision to represent that brand, and that would bring it to life in the most effective way. That's kind of, and those decisions for me are based on, I don't know if taste is the right word, because it's, like you say, it's so broad and so subjective, but taste has to be adapted to the brand that you're working on, I guess.
You mentioned about getting, you know, out there and out of your bubble, experiencing things that will enter your creativity. And a couple of talks ago, there was a really nice sort of example of a radical hanging out, I think it was, which is like a great idea. Like you just
Absolutely.
intensely hang out with someone or with
Sounds like a dream.
all sorts of people,
Yes.
and that will inevitably impact your creativity and change the way that you create. How can you build that as a routine into, you run a department of creatives.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, it's hard. I think it's by creating balance and realizing that creativity thrives when you give people the space to explore the world around them. Only when they interrogate different points of view and different elements of the world around them can they become better creatives. It's like I don't necessarily agree with Trump and his views or his supporters, but I'd love to get to know them to understand why they think that way. So it's not just about going out and finding things you like to do and like to see, but it's just absorbing everything around you because it all contributes to your creative.
I mean, the contradictory world
Exactly.
needs
Couldn't
to be
be
embraced.
more contradictory.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so the next one is product, which is not so much what you make, but how you sort of judge the product of anyone's creativity, or, you know, how you assess creativity.
Yeah.
So, you know, you do a lot of that as soon as you become a creative director, you have to start doing that.
Yeah.
So you've been doing it for a good few years.
So very, very many years. I won't give my age away. But
What are
yeah.
your sort of guiding principles on assessing what is good creativity?
Well, I think as creatives, obviously we want to entertain people and put beautiful things out into the world, but I think the main criteria and the power of advertising is that you have the power to effect change. And I'm not just talking about big worldwide change, I'm talking about change people's mood, change people's behavior, change people's opinions, change their view of a brand. And change even a law. You know, advertising has the power to do that. So my first and basic criteria is, has that piece of work changed the way I feel or think about something? Because that for me is the most powerful. When it reframes how I think about something or how I see something, I think that is a really effective piece of advertising. And then everything else needs to come into play. You know, it's like, obviously, it has to be executed beautifully. Not beautifully necessarily, if it relies on it being executed really badly, and that brings the idea to life in the best way. But does the execution do that incredible idea justice? But the first thing I would focus on is, does it effect some kind of change and reframe a behavior or a thought or a point of view?
Can you think of a time in your career where someone's brought an idea to you that has completely made you reassess how you see the world?
There've been several, too many to think of. But I mean, I would say I look for that in every single idea we've ever done. So I would say, like, you know, we were working on an Alexa campaign, and the creatives were like, the brief was, we take technology for granted. So how do we, you know, kind of make people think about that. And we were like, yeah, what if we showed people what the world would be like without technology? So it reframes the way you think about technology. Or for instance, I worked on a campaign many moons ago for the Zimbabwean newspaper, which was so effective in change that it actually managed to change the law and get a duty lifted from the paper so that it could get into the right hands of people that could read it. So many campaigns, too many to mention, but all of them, and what I like to do in the work is do work that actually creates change of behavior, change of opinion.
Sure.
Yeah.
Has that always been the way? Do you think your criteria have shifted, or are they sort of fundamental?
I think it's fundamental. I think I've always worked that way as long as I can remember. I've always been drawn to the essence of the idea and what it's saying. That is more important to me than the execution and the craft of it, although not to say by any means that that's not crucial to the idea. But that's always been the way that I've worked. I guess the executions and what I look for in execution might have changed over time, because as something becomes saturated, like I remember when I saw a case study for the first time ever, I was like, holy shit, that's a completely new way of doing things. That's great. But then you see 5 million of them and you're like, maybe I'm done with that. So that's changed, but not the essence of the idea.
And if we're looking at, this is a huge one that we could probably do a whole talk on, but the kind of state of the industry type thing. But thinking about the sort of level of creativity for brands that is out there and the kind of things that you see all the time, is there anything that sort of you find particularly exciting right now, or anything that you find particularly boring?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of brilliant work out there that reframes perceptions. For example, if you take the Le Brest campaign, that reframed the way people thought about periods. But on the whole, I feel like people have become a little bit more risk averse. And I think if you want to really make a change and stand out and be surprising and actually cause a behavior change, you have to take risks. You have to, do something so bold and unexpected. And I feel like less risks are being taken. It feels like a lot of the work is designed to get through lots of approval processes as opposed to just make people think completely differently.
Let's go on to the process of creativity, which we have touched on.
Fun part, yes.
You have said a little bit about it. And of course, it's about sort of being a sponge, soaking everything up, challenging your assumptions, embracing contradictions. We've spoken about all of this already, but where do you start when you've got, the first time you've got a brief? At least you have a brief to begin with. It's not a blank page usually.
The way I usually start is, we're problem solvers, right? And we try to come up with creative solutions. So it makes sense that the first step would be questions. I ask as many questions as humanly possible, and it's always, I think the best ideas come from asking the right questions. I'll spend a lot of time interrogating the questions that we want to solve and how we can come up with the best solutions to those questions. And even then, I don't think the process is a linear one. I don't think the questions stop at the start. I constantly keep questioning. I think it's about that curiosity of always trying to grow, get in deeper into the problem. So even once the strategy's written up, and creatives come up with ideas, I think it's a constant back and forth because sometimes that strategy won't lead to the best ideas. So maybe we should rewrite the brief and ask the right questions, and maybe that'll lead to better creative solutions. So it's not a linear, smooth line, but it always starts with questions, human interactions, discussions. Yeah.
What about tools or sort of, processes? I hate to say the word. It feels like it sucks the joy out of things.
You're going to say the A word.
No, I'm not.
Oh, right.
You can if you like.
No, it's fine.
That's a tool.
I was like, that's the first. I hear tools. I'm like, yeah.
But are there any tools that you love to see your creatives turning to or using?
Yes, conversations. Human conversations, that's a tool. I just think I see the best ideas come from like someone who walks past someone's computer and goes, oh shit, what's that? Oh, have you thought about it like that? Have you thought about this? And that's what I mean about questions. I don't think they're ever ending. And I love it when one person builds on another person's idea. And I think that spirals into the best kind of thinking. So for me, that's the best tool. But if all else fails, I'll probably do 20 squares.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, where you just like, you know, free thinking, have to fill in the 20 squares no matter what. Yeah, and deadlines help, I think, with that process. You know that you're going to have to stop eventually, and, you know, it's pens down.
Yeah, great. Always a good tip.
Yeah.
To, like, sort of push things through until you
Yes.
have something on the paper.
Exactly.
How do you decide when an idea is done? I mean,
God.
you know, at some point you've got to kind of go and make the thing. But,
Yeah.
you know, maybe if you're writing.
It's a tough one because I don't ever think an idea is fully done, but I guess when I can say the idea out loud to someone and not pick any holes in it, then it feels kind of done. It feels like at least it's logical and it makes sense, and I convince someone that there's something worth in it. So then I feel like an idea is done. But of course, you can always craft and you can always push and you can always make it better till the last moment, until that deadline hits.
Absolutely. I'm very aware that we're sort of standing between people and cooling off
Yes.
with a cold drink or something.
Yes.
So let's get to the last part of this,
Of course.
which is press, which is the one that was like awkwardly given a P name, but is, yeah, sort of the external factors. So where do you think the sort of seeds of creativity are sown for you?
Well, I grew up in South Africa, so they were definitely sown there. And I think South Africa taught me three things. One is basically, because the budgets are so small, your ideas have to be much bigger and punch above their weight. It's definitely very much a place of contradictions, but it taught me that the way things are don't have to be the way things are. Like, you have the power to change things, which was great. And it also taught me to stop trying to replicate formulas, because my whole life I grew up looking at annuals and like would look at, you know, what the rest of the world was doing and trying to replicate it. And I think it was a real realization that, because when I stopped doing that and focused on the tools that we had to draw from, that's when I really found my voice. You know, so we created our own style, and it differentiated us from what everyone else all over the world was doing. So I think it very much taught me those three things: create your own style, your own voice. So don't try to replicate formulas. Don't go and do what's trending right now. Do the opposite. And of course, yeah, punching above your weight. I mean, the Zimbabwean's a great example because we had a £4,000 budget, and that was it. And
You
it
got
was
law changed, and it's ended up in
and
a
we
museum,
got a law
right?
changed, and
Yeah.
it's hanging up in a museum. So I think just never give up. It's just about being relentless. There's a way to get it done always. So yeah, that's kind of it.
Incredible. There might be some clients in the room, so I think this is one that maybe is a bit crowbarred into this, but do you have any advice for clients wanting to get the best out of their agency?
Yes. Well, I think it's about treating your agency as part of your team. I mean, you hired them for the right reason, so it's about building a relationship where there's enough trust, where you feel like you're able to take some risks and leaps of faith with them in order to get to that really bold, groundbreaking idea that's going to change the world. Yeah.
Great, nice and succinct. This has been super quick fire. Usually
Yes.
my interviews are way more rambling than this, so maybe a
Well,
tight
I'm
deadline
just
has
very
kept it
aware
good.
that everyone's dying for a drink, so please go and get one.
It's
Unless
been
anyone
a really
has
great
any.
way to get an impression of your whole view on creativity
Well,
encapsulated.
thank
So
you.
thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
And
Thank
all
you
for
for
listening and
having
hanging
me.
in there.
Thank you, everyone.